say capital C, capital G?
Yeah, so community with a capital C and then all one word, guest.
Yeah, no
capital
space.
G, no space, I think.
That's what it was. Say that now.
Yep, that's good.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Usually a piece of paper that we keep on the table with the.
Oh,
That's great. Well, I had my first fishing.
Yeah, how'd that go? I was kind of curious.
Not bad. The guy was funny. Like, you know, he's obviously been up there for a long time, and this is what he does. But I caught a couple of pickerel.
Oh, yes.
And Renee caught 4 or 5 bass, kind of small.
Yeah.
And then we got 2 decent-sized catfish.
Oh.
Which I didn't even know there would be catfish up there. But so we had a shore lunch and ate the pickerel that I'd caught and ate one of the catfish, and then he cleaned them all, and we brought the rest back to cook at the cottage another day. So it was all right. It was long.
Yeah.
It was a long day.
They tend to know where to go, those guys.
They do, right? It was just, they were
pickerel is one of my favorite catch and fish.
So,
I mean, and eat.
Yeah, it's so nice.
I caught a lot of smallmouth bass.
Yeah.
That's what we ate. I was looking for pickerel. Yeah.
I'd had 1 or 2 more. I caught something really large, and at first he's like, "Oh no, you're hooked on a rock." I said, "I don't think so, because it feels like it." And sure enough, it was something big, but it broke the line. My line wasn't heavy enough, so who knows what that was. The one that got away. That's my fish story.
Yeah.
My fish tale for my life. And
Did you have to clean them yourself?
oh heavens, no! I didn't even bait my own hook. No, he had big fat worms, so I was not touching them. Maybe if they were, but you have to, I guess, right? Because you can't have a little skinny worm. The hook wouldn't, or you could use other bait, non-live bait, I guess. But
yeah.
no, I wouldn't bait a hook myself. I'm too squeamish for that.
Yeah, the fellow's gone now.
Oh, see?
Yeah.
Well, he has been moving around, like he's been filming
Oh,
people
really?
this way and then following people out to the corner. We'll just gonna go chase him off. Already out. We're done.
Have camera. I just don't want to end up on
On
camera.
Started at 5. Paul texted me, I think, saying, hey, so he should be here.
Rosanna, I think this was her first day back, or I got an out of office because I sent her some stuff.
Rosanna accepted the meeting
Yeah.
request, so
But I think when I sent some documents to Ron Monday, the out of office message, I don't know if it's the truth.
There was an accident coming up on Oxford Street. I don't know if that slows things back, but it wasn't a huge accident. I almost wanted to yell and say, just move your cars. I know if it's under a certain amount, they just, you know.
Yeah, they don't want you.
They don't want a police officer coming
No.
there. It's like.
no.
No, and if we're any indication, we were number 77 in the queue for our.
Oh, no.
For our gentleman. If I'm going downtown, I usually will come the back route, like if I'm going to City Hall or anything, and do Mornington to Quebec and go that way. That might be, I try and stay off Oxford. A lot of fun.
Hello.
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 How are you guys?
Good, how are you?
Good. Where shall I sit?
Where would you like to sit? Want to sit? You could just,
I'll let Shelley know.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
she was in her office.
Is Ainsley joining us?
She's online.
Oh, she is? Oh, hello, Ainsley.
She's muted on.
Sorry for being late. I thought it was at 5:30, so.
Hello.
There she is.
Hello.
Hello, I'm here.
What's that?
You do, or?
That's a good question. We probably should, so she can see us then. How are you doing?
Doing okay.
Good. That seems to be everywhere. Covered for good. The flurry before the long weekend.
Yeah.
I think it's an eventful day.
Well, let's
There's always
eventful.
something happening here.
Yes, I can imagine. I haven't seen anything from the CBC about their article
So
yet.
there was an article in print,
Oh,
and then there was
what?
a radio
Oh,
article.
okay.
Yeah, so it's a radio story. It was not all that bad. I mean, there was nothing new, again, right? It was sort of the same stuff. Tim Smuck, so he's manager, I think you probably met him. He spoke a little bit about the partnership with LMCH and some of the challenges that we have with the one couple that they interviewed were saying, we won't move into a townhouse, and so we're what was the language? It was something like we are not marginalizing, but we are discriminating against people on social assistance. But that's not, that's not a limited housing rule, that's just.
Yeah.
So a few things like that, but I think overall, it wasn't that bad, and they talked a lot about the fire alarms.
Okay.
I think the radio version was better than the
Yeah.
print version. Tim had a little bit more time in the radio version.
Well, it's
Yeah.
dynamic too, which is
Yes.
nice, right? So.
And she had misquoted a couple of things because she articulated that we were considering hiring the security manager, but that position's been filled, and he starts on Wednesday of next week.
Yeah, okay.
There's a few things, yeah,
Okay.
but.
Getting the internet.
And how is it being back at work?
Good. It's been a full week so far, so, daycare's been going pretty well so far.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
Well, and that's a whole new world for him,
It
because
is.
he's had none of that socialization with
the-
other.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And the first day went
Children.
well. Yesterday, though, he realized that this is going to be the routine for a while.
Good
That
for
was, yeah, exactly. That was
Like-
a bit of a,
12 years, or?
yeah, that's right. So he spent a lot of time cuddling with the daycare provider.
Aw.
Which, hopefully that was okay for them, it'd be good for me, but, the code to log in for the internet.
Community guest, capital C and capital G. Yes, there is a Zoom link. It should be on the meeting invite.
Awesome.
Oh, I guess I should go get my laptop. Sorry.
That's okay.
Not a problem at all.
We're laughing into that. My oldest, I was meeting the, they were like, they, like, working with it, and I would leave and I would cry every day on the table. My work, she would be
Oh.
out the window, like, screaming in her face.
Oh.
On every minute, until like she was like, and my little one couldn't care less. Give me a high five, I was like, whatever. Yeah, and I'd be like, if I wanna cry, because you don't wanna, cry for me, like, I can count on one hand, like, every day she was upset, and so different.
Well, the thing about COVID is that, like, they just take them, right? You drop them off and then they get shuffled in, which is kind of crappy because you can't see where they are and stuff like that, but it does help with the goodbyes, because someone's waiting in line behind you too to come in, and, right?
Although I have said, like, so, Harper starts school this year, and so I'll just take that time outside and get disaster. My big sunglasses, because I gotta leave her outside.
Oh, yeah.
There's like a gate, right, to get into the JK yard, and
Oh.
Oh.
don't call me that day. Pretty.
It's always change, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
turn the
enjoy.
computer up. Oh.
Yeah, see if we can feedback if you're on that.
Should be able to.
Okay, so, Ainsley, can you still hear it?
Yep.
Okay. Mute, and then we'll just use that.
Yeah.
the agenda, guys. Okay, so, how are you?
You're looking hand. Really jealous about that. Yeah, that's wonderful. See somebody enjoying their summer.
I do a lot of work in my yard and stuff, so I'm out this weekend. That's where I get my tan from.
Jetting away to these secret vacations
No.
the rest of the time.
When I went to Perry Sound, it was around like this weather, not as windy as this, but it was 22, 21. But it was nice. Nice and comfortable.
Okay, well, sorry for the delay, everyone. I guess we'll call the meeting to order at this time. We do have a good chunky agenda in front of us, a lot of really interesting policies for consideration tonight, and thanks everyone for their hard work in putting all that together. Does anyone have anything to add to the agenda at this time, or any other amendments they'd like to make? Secondly, I'll put you other. Thank you. Seeing none around the room, could I have a motion to accept the agenda? Mr. Nelson, seconded by Ms. Wilcox. All those in favor? Opposed? Great, that's carried. All right, we'll move right into the affordable housing rates policy then, and Ms. Gren, we'll turn things over to you.
Thank you through the chair. Marisa has prepared affordable housing rates policy. Basically, it outlines our commitment to being part of the solution to affordable housing crisis. We want to develop and manage social and affordable housing units. And we do recognize that there are different levels of need for affordable housing in London and Middlesex. So a few key parts of this policy is that it outlines that we would like to create mixed-use communities. We will endeavor to offer institutional and commercial rental units. And really what we want to bring is that those services would benefit LMCH tenants, but also the wider community. And another important key point here is that we want to make sure that we provide the greatest depth of affordability possible for all returning tenants, but also for all the new tenants that will be in this new development. Another, again, important part of this is that with the redevelopment activities, we will endeavor to maintain as many existing RGI housing units as possible in the communities that we will be redeveloping. And then there is eligibility criteria for those who will be applying for affordable rental housing units.
Great, thank you for that. Questions?
I just have a few. So in our stock right now, we don't have like commercial units. Is that correct? So this is a policy revisions or a new policy that says the possibility of when we regenerate or increase our stock, we're going to look at every opportunity to have mixed use. Is that correct? Okay. I wondered if it would be good to add something into the policy component number 1. Just, it says, where possible, LMCH will endeavor to create mixed-use communities by also offering institutional commercial rental units. And I'd like to see something in here that says that it's not going to reduce the stock of public housing in doing so. I see regeneration of being, the 3,800 or how many units we have. We're going to have that many units before or after this, and then we're maybe opening it up to having some opportunities for commercial and institutional use as well. So I'd like to see that added if that's something that could be a friendly addition to it. I just don't want us to think that or anybody to think that reading this that we're trying to reduce the stock that we have. But,
Yes, no, I mean, the intention at the end of the day, through your chair, is that we will maintain at the end when regeneration is complete, whether that's 15, 20, 30 years from now, that we will have the same number of RGI units, and then we will have affordable units, and then potentially also the commercial, retail space, whatever that looks like. That's all in addition to being able to maintain the space units, which would be, a requirement, of the service manager.
Okay.
Right? The province has requirements of how many, units need to be maintained in a service area, and so but that's always been our intention.
Right, because I would think that as an organization, our goal is to increase the number of affordable housing we have, and wait lists go down and eliminate it. That's our main goal, as opposed to offering institutional or commercial use properties. But wherever possible, when we're thinking about, that makes a lot of sense. So that's all. I just wanted some clarification, maybe add that to that number, not reducing the stock would be good. And the only other thing, this is really good policy, I was just thinking, and this is kind of through the chairs, just really a comment. I think some of the structure of the policy, I found it really hard to know what's a section and what's not a section in some of them, just going through this is not just this one. For example, in, I think it's E below, 1E, it says section 1D. Well, section 1D to me goes all the way up to the top to section 1. I think it might be section 4.1D that's referring to. And I won't go through each one. I can send them where I think, but there's a couple in this particular policy that kind of make me think that what's a section and what's not a section. And so this is kind of the housekeeping. And another example might be in the next one, number 2. I'll say that's a subsection 2, 4.2. And II, and that has to do with unless otherwise subsidized by institutional commercial rents discussed below, and I think it means discussed above, but maybe just quoting a section. I think that's all, just some little cleanup stuff. And then right down below, even in III, it talks about unless otherwise subsidized by institutional commercial rents discussed in section 1.0. So I don't know. I'm not sure where the below connects to. Maybe it's connecting to this, but then this one connects it up to 1.0, and so it just what would be the best way to? And then even in the next one, it talks about section 3, cost outlined in section 3. Not quite sure what section.
I think it may be a formatting issue because it came in outside of the LMCH format and they had to move it in, so it might just be a formatting issue. We'll have to correct it.
I guess I'm just kind of pointing out some of these. I'm having trouble connecting where they go. And what's a section and what's not a section.
So I've got a few that I.
Are those kind of things?
Yeah, same sort of thing when we were reviewing all of the policies. So those sort of things, why don't we just send separately through email? It's just minor things, just as another set of eyes on the policy.
Yeah.
If you forward those to me, I can go through and kind of coordinate getting it all fixed up. No, that's okay. That's fine.
Last night. I will do that.
Yeah, but you're right. It's like it's nothing that's substantive in nature.
Yeah.
That's just nice to
Yeah.
I appreciate that when I'm writing policy.
And Paul, I don't know if you want me to keep going with this particular, like, get me my finished stuff, that'd be great. So, on number 4 of the piece, for II, at least one member of the household is able to live independently. And I stopped there thinking about what does independently mean? And I was kind of wondering, what did I say here? Does this mean, I wondered if this has to be fleshed out a little bit, what independent means. Does it mean unassisted? Or does it mean, I don't know. Dependence to me, as a father, is really interesting. I'm hoping, so independently, I just thought, what does that mean? I don't know if you guys have an understanding of what that means.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, so we've taken this language from the current RGI eligibility requirement. And you're right, independently means unassisted living.
Unassisted, okay.
So it really relates to, again, persons' physical and mental ability to live independently. But we can certainly look at other ways potentially to describe that.
or even maybe if, yeah, like, for example, because I'm assuming it's sort of to screen that, we're not in the business of providing housing for people that need, retirement care, for example, or a group home or something like that.
But they may have a power attorney set up, does that mean they're independent?
Yeah, that's a good
All
point,
this
yeah.
stuff, but that just to me, kind of, I stopped there and started thinking, well, what does independence mean?
Yeah.
But unassisted, I thought was maybe a word that could be in there too. It's like, okay, I understand, they don't need help, within that daily household activities. They don't need to have a nurse come in and that sort of, or that kind of thing, right, or live with them. And then lastly, I think with this policy, I wondered about force III. Is that should be, each member of the household is either, or is it all three? I think it's either. They're either a Canadian citizen, or they're a permanent resident of Canada. So maybe just adding, each member of the household is either A, or B, or C. Is that my understanding?
Yeah. But doesn't the word "or" mean that they're exclusive of each other, because it's not "and"? Because if it's household is a Canadian citizen, blah, 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 and then I have to qualify for all three, but if it's "or", it just has to be one of the criteria, I would think.
Okay.
Ainsley?
Any opinion?
Yeah, no, I think the only thing missing is after A, either a comma or a semicolon.
Right.
So either, I mean, a Canadian citizen, comma, a permanent resident of Canada, or has applied for status, comma, or a refugee, I think works. Or you could have a Canadian citizen, comma, or a permanent resident, or.
The syntax. That's it from me, Chair.
Further comments, questions? Ms. Wilcox?
To the chair. So I wondered about, a couple of things. I wondered if it was worth adding a definition about regeneration. I think it's a term that is not, may not be well understood. So I wonder if perhaps an explanation of what regeneration is and sort of how this policy supports that. The only other piece that I wondered about was, so all of the terms that are outlined in the policy, I'm assuming they're grounded in provincial policy that outlines eligibility, or perhaps by the service manager. And so every time, do we note that this is in relation to current policies? I sort of read through and then I wondered about, okay, who sets this policy and, who determines what, and maybe it's good to ground that in wherever that policy is, and noting that it's, we're looking at the most current version of it, and it'd be subject to updates should those legislation be updated and change eligibility terms. Those are just my
Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I couldn't hear the end of Rosanna's comment. I assume it wasn't a question for me. You're inviting me to provide comments?
I am, yes. I saw your hand up, you were next on the agenda, or speaker's list, sorry.
Thank you. So my question through you to staff, I assume this is an entirely new policy, correct? Or is it an update to an existing policy?
It is an entirely new policy.
So I'm just wondering if maybe you can explain what in the policy operationally currently exists, or is everything in the policy a new operational component that doesn't currently exist, or if there are some that you could flag for us that are a departure from a current practice.
Thank you for the question through the chair. So this policy was created in an effort to support our future regeneration activities, and we will define it in this policy later. But this is why it's completely new because we haven't done this type of work before. So we wanted to set this policy in advance of our future regeneration activity to make sure that we all understand that, again, our intent is to create affordable housing at the greatest depth of affordability without compromising the financial sustainability of the new development. So this was the goal, and perhaps one of the areas where it is consistent with the current policies. This is where RGI eligibility, but for this particular purpose, it's affordable rental household eligibility. So we don't have affordable housing units now, but we borrowed the same eligibility criteria for affordable housing. But everything else is brand new in this policy.
Thank you. And then through you, so where do you look, or is there like a review of best practices that goes into determining the eligibility criteria and kind of the basis for the policy, or how did you develop the policy?
So we had a group of staff working on this policy, and then we have senior leadership team providing further feedback. So this was really created with the goal of, again, defining that guiding policy as to how we're going to set our future regeneration activities, what are really the goals that we're trying to achieve with the new developments, and how we're going to continue to offer housing.
Okay, and the reason I ask, the mixing in the mixed use component, seemed like a creative solution to me, and I was wondering if that was something that we found was working elsewhere in other municipalities, or where the idea to incorporate the mixed use component came from.
Thank you. Through the chair, so yes, our staff have done extensive research, looked at other examples with different municipalities who have undertaken regeneration and revitalization efforts, and we've looked at their best practices and created the policy looking at success stories as to what would apply in our case.
Great, thank you. My only nitpick in 2.0 definitions is missing an I. And those are my only questions and comments. Thanks.
Thank you. And just to, if I could provide some additional commentary as well. Most of our LMHC sites are actually close to areas where official plan policy would encourage mixed-use development as well. So I think that's sort of a good fit with what we're trying to achieve from a development perspective, that some people in the city that do development might be interested in as we continue to move forward. The only thing I have then, are there any other speakers? The only thing I have is, it's a small thing, but I think it's fairly significant as well, is the title of the policy I actually find a bit wonky. Because when I first saw the title, forgive me, I don't have a suggestion for an alternative, and I don't like to throw something without a solution, but I thought there'd be actual like affordable housing rates contained in this policy, and it doesn't really have identified rates. And then affordable tenant policy, it sounds like we're defining what an affordable tenant is, which I don't think was the intent of the policy as well. So perhaps we could look at something that's related to regeneration, since that's what the policy is intending to achieve, and then it would be a good companion with the tenant relocation policy. So maybe these are specific regeneration policies that are only with us for as long as we have regeneration, and if the regeneration initiative ends, then we retire the policies as well. Sound good? Anything further? Okay. So we actually don't have a recommendation. We'll just be receiving this through committee. I'm assuming then this policy will be coming forward to the board for formal approval at a later date. Okay, that's great. Anything further then on this policy? Okay, seeing that, we'll move on to the tenant relocation policy, and Ms. Grimm, this is you as well.
Thank you. Through the chair, so this policy is also consistent with the previous policy, tenant relocation policy establishes the framework to govern temporary or permanent relocation of LMCH households due to regeneration activities, also potentially conversion or substantial revitalization of the units. It also details the efforts that LMCH will make to mitigate any undue financial hardship caused due to relocation activities. Under scope, we did try to make it clear that this will only apply in those cases where LMCH requires households to relocate due to, again, regeneration activities. And in cases where households wish to move from one unit to another or one community to another, then our standard internal transfer policy would apply. We've made a few commitments here when it comes to tenant relocation. In terms of providing notice, we will endeavor to provide at least 8 months notice to the entire community prior to construction activities. And we will also provide separate notices to each household if they are affected by construction and if they would need to relocate. We're also committed to working one-on-one with each individual household who would be affected by this relocation and work on different housing options, trying to find units that would be suitable within LMCH portfolio, but also if they choose to move out to a non-LMCH unit, we would also support them with that decision. Once the policy is approved, working on tenant relocation procedures, which will have more details about moving assistance and financial support, but we wanted to include the key messages here because we recognize that there will be financial hardship due to this relocation, and we will, again, endeavor to assist households who are affected by this relocation. And last, but again, very important point is for those households that are relocated, should there be an opportunity to return to the community that was redeveloped, we will provide them with the right of return to the community where they were relocated from.
Great. Questions and comments? Ms. Anderson?
Thanks, and through you, Mr. Chair, I have a question I noticed at the top there's the related documentation box and legislation is blank, and this is not a trick question in any way. I'm wondering if there is legislation that applies to this. I don't know the answer. Like, for example, the Residential Tenancies Act describes, that you can only evict tenants in certain circumstances and the conditions that have to be met. And I'm just wondering if under the Housing Services Act or otherwise, if there's legislation that applies to the steps that need to be taken before a displacement occurs.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, RTA would apply here. There is a reference under 5.4 to the agreement to terminate tenancy. So once we're able to find suitable housing for those tenants that would need to be relocated, they would be accepting the offer of the new unit and simultaneously signing an agreement to terminate tenancy for that particular unit. So we can certainly include reference to that under the policies or under other resources.
Further from you, Ms. Anderson, as a follow-up?
No, that's it for me. Thank you.
Further questions? Ms. Wilcox?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple of comments initially. So I do wonder about perhaps adding a definition section in the policy as well, and again, maybe adding a definition around regeneration, what that is. With regards to section 5.1, I wonder about what is meant by co-create, because I think expectations create and being able to deliver on those expectations as such. So I guess that is a question, and then my second 5.2. So I know in the, further on in the policy, we talk about grievances and the channels through which those may go. But I wonder about with notice, like, what about feedback? So as we're working through the process, what is the feedback, whether that is through existing channels that LMCH has? Like, how do, if there's a need for clear communication through this process, and so what's the feedback? I guess is my question, is how do we build that in so that, because there are other pieces where it may not be agreement, but it may be a question. That's it from me.
Thank you, through the chair. So for the 5.1 regarding communications, this particular paragraph only relates to tenant relocation. There is a separate communication strategy that will be coming related to regeneration activities in general. So by co-creating, working with tenants, this really means working on customized solutions for each household, because again, we recognize that impact will be different for each household. Some may be affected because of school. We will try to find them housing within the same school zone. For some, it may be financial hardship. So we will work with them individually on creating those solutions that would work for them. In terms of, 5.2, on regarding the notice. So this notice is regarding how we will communicate with tenants directly. Again, that opportunity for one-on-one communication will provide feedback and questions back and forth as related to tenant relocation. But as for the project altogether, that will be covered under communications policy.
I'll look to the chair. I wonder if adding some clarity then in 5.1 would be helpful around co-creating and maybe outlining as indicated what that involves. That might be helpful. Thank you for the response.
Yeah, and if I could just add support to the co-create piece as well. I think that could be interpreted as you're working with LMCH staff to design your unit, right? And what you're going to have, and you're moving into a new unit, and yours and stuff like that, but the expectations, these are things that would affect.
So I think I do have one additional question, if I may, through the chair. 5.7, so the last paragraph there is the household being relocated. Is that specific only to what's outlined in 5.7 for moving to a non-LMCH unit, or does that apply to all? We talked about a household being relocated with an opportunity to return to the same community, but it's only falling within for a tenant who would be moving to a non-LMCH unit as part of regeneration activity. So I wonder if that applies to all, or if that is just specific to section 5.7.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't think I understand the question. So this is for those households that would be affected by relocation activities, and they may choose to move to a non-LMCH unit. Can you?
Yes. My apologies. I could be a little. It's been a long day, but perhaps not got all that eloquent by the end of the day. So there's the paragraph that begins with if a household is being relocated and there's an opportunity to return to the same community following regeneration. That section, is that specific only to a tenant who has moved to a non-LMCH unit as part of the activity?
So I understand it now. So should households choose to relocate to a non-LMCH unit, they would lose their RGI subsidy, so they would not be receiving RGI subsidy any longer. Should they stay with LMCH, they will continue receiving subsidy in a different LMCH unit.
If I may, just for clarity, I think what resident is asking is, so if we transferred a family to one of our sites, are we still guaranteeing right of return back to the original site?
So that is covered under the next paragraph there, that should there be an opportunity to return, depending on how many units will be available, we will provide them with the right to return.
I just wondered if that applies to all, because there could be a scenario perhaps where, LMCH may not be supplied what the family was needing. So the option that works for that household may be a non-LMCH unit. So just wondering if all individuals, whether they stay within an LMCH unit or not, are, as part of the relocation process, are they given an opportunity to return to the same community upon completion of the regeneration activity?
Thank you, through the chair. So no, the intent was, if they choose to move out to a non-LMCH unit, they wouldn't be eligible to return. However, there may be some extenuating circumstances where if we do not have a suitable unit within our portfolio and it is really the need, that they would have to temporarily relocate to a non-LMCH unit, then they would have that opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair to staff. I was just, in section 5.5, one quick question, and it talks about moving assistance will be provided to all households who are required to leave their unit due to regeneration construction, including those choosing to permanently leave LMCH. My question is there any limits to this moving assistance? Like, within this Middlesex County, or like if they chose to move to Calgary, like that's kind of what I was thinking here was, like should we put some limits for this moving assistance, basically? I'm just kind of thinking of a situation where we have another big boom in the oil industry and so everybody moves to Calgary, and anyways, we wouldn't pay their moving costs clearly to Calgary, but I thought maybe just some limits there.
Thank you, and through the chair, we have not considered this point, so thank you for bringing this up.
Maybe within the county of Middlesex or something like that, or I don't know. Thank you.
Any other? Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, just as a follow-up to Rosanna's questions, my understanding is that any displacement for the reason of renovations, the tenant has to be offered their spot back. So that's not entirely clear to me in the policy, and I think we have to indicate their right of first refusal before they actually move out and accept the new. So I guess what I'm asking is maybe between now and our next meeting, and with the changes going to be made with reference to the RTA, maybe also that process can just be examined procedurally, because if there's a form or an offer being made, I think it would also fairly indicate that the tenant is required to indicate at that time whether or not they intend on coming back. I don't know if that operationally was built into this already. Maybe staff can elaborate a bit on that for me.
Thank you, through the chair. We will prepare this edits and we will present it at the next meeting.
Any follow-up? Ms. Anderson, any follow-up?
Nope, thank you.
And then I have just two items. So first of all, I think it's a very well thought out policy and very comprehensive, so thank you very much for that. The only two things I have, one relates to 5.5, and it just sort of builds on what Mr. Milson was talking about. I'm actually wondering why we would be providing moving assistance to people that are choosing to exit LMHC and go to another provider. And I don't know whether that's something that we would normally do if someone were, if we weren't doing regeneration and they were leaving to somewhere else, we would provide. I would think as a landlord would would like to try to work with someone and move them into a new unit in our location, but if they're choosing to exit and go somewhere else, that's an independent choice they've made, and it's not really affected by generation per se. So I'm wondering if you could just speak to that, and that's the second one.
Thank you, Chair. Financial support could really, again, this will be further developed in a procedure, but it could mean a number of different assistance options. Frequently, LMR is last month's rent deposit is being released at the end of the tenancy. Could potentially consider releasing it sooner to support those households to actually secure their next permanent housing. So again, we just wanted to put this clause to state our commitment to supporting individuals, but we haven't really developed an actual working procedure.
Okay, so it wouldn't necessarily be that we're providing, like we're paying for movers to move someone to, okay. So that wasn't clear to me, so it'll be good.
It will really depend on the budget at that point and how we make it fair and equitable for everybody, and then create eligibility requirements, so that will be all in the procedure.
Okay. Thank you for that. Then the other question I had is in section 6, where it speaks about grievances, it does encourage or acknowledge that residents can speak to a number of different people if they have concerns. One of them is their local elected representative. I'm just wondering why we would be encouraging people to contact the shareholder or members, well, individuals of the shareholder to actually then speak to us about an issue. Just wondering why that was identified there.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I think we wanted to keep it transparent, that we're not discouraging people from doing that should they choose. We can certainly look at different wording and perhaps add something to encourage to communicate with us prior to exploring different options.
Okay. Ms. Anderson.
And through you, Chair, just arising from those comments, I was thinking the same thing, and I think the word grievances, I don't think the context is right for the word grievances because it implies that there's some sort of union involvement, and I agree with the concept as well. I think I would hope that as part of like a review against the RTA that this section could either reference like a person's ability to reach out to the landlord tenant board. I know they have like a citizen helpline or something, and direct it more in that direction, because I think our approach is that, you know, we are undertaking this process of regeneration in accordance with our legal obligations, and we believe we're taking all the appropriate steps. And if they have you know, a differing opinion of that, I agree with Paul that we probably then don't also help them dispute that with us, although I understand the intent, which is to, you know, resolve it without escalating it. So my suggestion would be to direct that more towards the external resources as opposed to the internal resources. But that might, I think a review of the RTA also may help clean up kind of the process for a dispute.
Thank you. Just to build on that, I think too, Ms. Anderson raised a good point. Perhaps if there's a procedure behind that indicates how complaints are dealt with, and if there are paths of escalation, and so a complaint may be received, it is unresolved, and the escalation path is to, let's say, the manager, and then it could be the CEO, and then from there, perhaps then you're talking about the other external bodies as well. I think being really transparent around maybe there are clear processes and for how complaints are resolved or not, and be really clear around what the next step is should a resolution not be achieved.
So just if I could again, so I am kind of concerned about the inclusion of the local elected representative in the policy. And thanks for your explanation, because I completely understand where we're coming from with including it, being open up the avenues and stuff like that. I just think that the policy then, even though it doesn't explicitly say it, it's sort of implicitly implying that you should go speak to your elected representative for them to advocate against the organization on your behalf, which would put both the councilors and our administration in a bit of a challenging position potentially. Anything further? Very well done. Okay, that will be coming forward then at a future meeting as well. The next one is Tenant Advisory Council Terms of Reference. Ms. Grin, you've got great ones tonight.
Thank you, through the chair. You will be sick of hearing from me.
No, not at all. You're doing wonderfully.
Tenant Advisory Council Terms of Reference, this is the second improved version. You've seen first version. We haven't highlighted the differences because this is sort of completely revamped Terms of Reference document. We've included some feedback that we've received at the last meeting. So we made it more clear, the reporting structure. We've clarified that the TAC will be reporting to the Board of Directors through the Committee of the Whole, and will receive operational knowledge and support from LMCH staff. We've clarified how many members will be on the TAC. We've changed this a little bit. We had 13 last time. We now included 11 to create equal representation from each community. And another thing that we changed was that we were intending initially to, should we not have enough interest from each community, we would then fill those seats from communities that would be interested. So we've changed that, and we've decided that we will not be filling with the communities that are interested, and we will stick to the number of seats that are available, just to, again, continue that consistency and create balanced representation. And throughout the year, should we not have enough interest, we will continue to work with those communities where we haven't had enough representation to have more tenants join the TAC. We've cleared a little bit operational procedures. We've clarified how items will get on the agenda of the TAC, and how they will be going into the work plan, and then the work plan would have to be approved by the board. This is how TAC will operate. We've also created the reimbursement for attending meetings in the form of stipend, and we've confirmed that we did allocate this amount to our budget. We've also cleared up the number of meetings, so we'll only have 9 meetings per year, and to make up for those sort of working type meetings, we will have every alternate meeting as a working TAC meeting, not an open meeting.
Great. Questions, comments? Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I think it looks great. I just have one comment or question, and it's with respect to the, sorry, I'm just scrolling. It's with respect to the honorarium section. I think it's great, and I think it's a great step. I wonder if staff could consider if we need to more explicitly reference other potential actions that we could take to reduce barriers. And I'm thinking along the lines of like an explicit statement that meeting times could be, flexible and assessed on the basis of the membership, or whether there's any ability to provide childcare for people that are attending, or any other ideas that you have, so that it's not just strictly the monetary honorarium, but reflecting other types of barriers and then renaming that section from honorarium to, I don't know, something along the lines of barrier reduction, or I don't know what the right word is for that, but that's just something I'd ask staff to consider to go beyond the financial stipend. And then I'm also wondering, just in the wording of that section, so TAC members are the same as just members, correct? Like, it says TAC members and then it says members, but I assume that's the same reference. So I would choose one or the other. And then I guess it's not entirely clear to me, every TAC member receives the $50, but then there's an additional consideration for some members based on equity. And maybe that's transit related or something. I wonder if that could be more clearly stated, like what that additional honorarium would be for. And just somehow, that sentence just, I didn't find it very clear. So those are just suggestions and considerations that I'd like to have staff consider. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, those are the exact points that would address those special circumstances in reducing barriers to attendance, whether it is childcare or transportation, but we can certainly include examples to make it a little more clear what it refers to.
Thank you, through the chair. There's some comments. I think it's really great, and thank you for bringing that back. It's great. I think this will be something really great for the organization and for the board. A few comments I have. In terms of recruitment and selection and orientation, I wonder if there might be some consideration also to note that, I mean, it's representative with representatives from each of the communities, but how do we recognize the diversity within those communities, and how do we strive to have a TAC that is representative of the LMCH and hopefully sort of intersectional, from an intersectionality approach of how do we build that in, and that may be something to be built into the application process. I really like the idea of the community partner selection panel. I think that's some great organizations there, and I wonder about even something to consider would be, does that body stay in place, and every time, as opposed to the Senate Advisory Committee, once they're in place in the selection process, is it better to have an outside or third-party panel that always looks at membership? One thing as well that it may be considered in the policy would be around, so if you have a member that is no longer able to participate within their 2-year term, what is the process of selection within that? So, and who might make that, again, is the panel that does that, say, within the first 2 years, and so that's just a comment for consideration. And my last one was around, I too was going to mention around the honorarium and some similar items around ensuring that it's reducing barriers as well. So I already noted that. I wanted to do a decision making. So consensus is, I think it's a great place to start, but I think there's how do we, and maybe this is work that the TAC may undertake. Maybe there's a process where they talk about how they want to work together. So consensus has, there can be variations of that, right? How do you ensure a safe space for everyone to feel safe to participate? And if you're having difficult conversations amongst that group, how do you create processes that you work to consensus, but you may figure out a way where everyone that's part of that committee feels safe and included in the process. And those are my comments on what really
Chair, to staff, just a great job on revising this particular policy. I have I have one further question that's got to do with the co-chair. That position to me seems like it's a staff position, and which is fine. I think that's one of the points that I point out. It's just giving some kind of guidance and some kind of linkage to staff. It's great to have the co-chair. My question is it a voting member or is it not? No. So I wondered if it would, just to be clear, if under the membership area you could include that position and behind it say non-voting. So it is a member of the TAC, but it's a non-voting member of the TAC. Does that make sense? And there's one item I just thought, if you've given any thought to, under the section that says no person shall be eligible for membership on the TAC unless he or she. I wondered if there's any thought given to minimum tenancy. So if someone became a tenant today, would they be eligible for a TAC? Was there any thought maybe of having a minimum so they have some experience as being in our tenancy? I was just curious if that was thought about, like minimum of at least 6 months they should be, or I just threw out 6 months. I don't know what the rate. But probably my guess is they would probably have to live or be a tenant for a set period of time before they even knew about this possibility of contributing to the community in this way. So it probably would be something that happens organically anyways, but it's just something I thought about when I was reading through this version.
Thank you, and through the chair, again, great point, and we'll take that into consideration and include the version for the next.
Excellent. And through the chair, one more, I just noticed that, if I may, under the meetings component, the last sentence, TAC meetings will be held publicly at the LMCH main office or on-site as agreed. What does on-site then mean? Does that mean out of another location of one of our sites, or is it, okay?
Thank you, through the chair. So yes, that was meant at one of LMCH sites where we have potentially lounges that would be open to the public.
Okay.
And we can clarify.
Yep, that's great. Oh, the other suggestion, just through the discussion of Ms. Wilcox, was just wondering, or actually Ms. Anderson, was if you wanted the honorarium, the heading of it, you can say honorarium and other expenses or something like that, just to include that it's more than just an honorarium. And I can see the reluctance of calling it remuneration or stipend, because I think we all would probably agree, and it would probably turn people off if this was part of their income, right? And it's not really meant to compensate them for every hour that they do preparing and stuff like that. So it really is an honorarium. So I like the word honorarium, and potentially if you add other expenses, that'd be great.
Any further? Ms. Anderson? So thank you very much. Sorry, I do have a comment on this one as well. I think it's very well done. I greatly appreciate that you've been responsive to the comments we had, because we had a really good discussion about this last time too. The only thing I've got a bit of a question about, or a suggestion, and my apologies if I didn't catch this last time, I just want to build on, as Wilcox was talking about the community partner selection panel. I think that's a great idea, and I think it's going to be very helpful in terms of reviewing the candidates and having some discussions with them and stuff like that. I'm just wondering if the panel is, the organizations that are listed are great organizations, but I'm wondering if they're sufficiently diverse for what perspectives we'd be looking at that would be coming forward. Because I noted that most of them relate to community and social services organizations, whereas there might be some concerns related to property matters and stuff like that. So I don't know if there are any organizations that are part of our community partners that could help us with that as well, that might be worth considering. The only other thing I had too is that the way I read this, based on the reporting structure, is it's an advisory committee to the board of directors. So I'm wondering then if the community partner selection panel makes a recommendation to the board on the members and then the board formally appoints them. I think I would be comfortable with that, especially for the first inaugural meeting, because it is an advisory committee to the board. That might address the comments Ms. Wilcox made as well about if there's a resignation, how does that occur and stuff like that. The panel could convene and make a recommendation. I don't foresee that being overly onerous in terms of staff time or the community partner or anything like that, and probably whatever stance from the board, but at least it's giving that official authority to it and recognition of the importance of the organization. Seeing none. Great. Thank you very much, and thanks for bringing it back. Progress there. Okay. Code of conduct, Ms. McKenzie.
All right, through you, Mr. Chair, this is an update to our existing employee code of conduct. And a lot of what you will see is been formatting changes, it's housekeeping, some of the language was quite old. But the one area, so obviously we've included our new care values in this document. The one area that is new will be all of the Section 3 for process. So this is the resolution and complaints portion of this document. That was not included previously in our code of conduct. So that is to help clarify for staff what the process is, should there be a complaint about the CEO or one of the directors, and how best to go about making a complaint. But other than that, there were some minor changes to the legislation. So we have included language around Bill 168 and 132 that hadn't been identified in our previous one, as well as occupational health and safety. Not that that is a new piece of legislation, but it had not been noted in our previous code of conduct. I think that is it for that one, because there were no substantive changes to the actual body of it.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about the formal investigation section. Who conducts that investigation? I'm just looking at the 3 bullets. Describes that one will be conducted. But is this is this dealt with by the ombudsman, or who has jurisdiction over the investigation process?
So, yeah, thank you, Chair. For an investigation, depending on who the complaint is related to, it could be an external investigator. That would be determined if the complaint was about the CEO, then that would be likely a conversation between the board chair and the HR department about how best to move that forward. And because of the nature of the relationship of the CEO to the rest of the staff, it's most likely that it would be an external investigator that would be hired to manage that piece. Internally, if it's one of the directors, it could either be myself or as the CEO currently, or it could be an external investigator, depending again on the nature of the complaint. That determination rests with the CEO.
Follow up or?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, if the complaint, and I don't expect that this will happen, but if the complaint is against the CEO, what's the process then to have the CEO determine whether a formal investigation is required?
So,
is there
if the complaint is specifically to the CEO, then the expectation in the process is that the complainant would speak to HR, and then HR would notify the chair of the board, and they would make a determination. The CEO wouldn't be involved in that piece of it.
I think Ms. Anderson's asking, let's say it's a general staff member, right? And so when it comes to the manager of HR and to the CEO, how is the determination made as to whether it's an internal investigation versus an external investigation.
If it's about the CEO?
No,
If it's about so if it's about another director or,
If that's captured your question, Ms. Anderson?
I think so. It just, to me, D reads a bit like an internal, like a bit of a loop that the CEO determines whether something's been resolved and whether a formal investigation is required, without really, without potentially a path for someone who has the complaint against the CEO, if the CEO then determines that nothing is required, or what the formal process is for the designate, like when the designate would be triggered instead of the CEO. I understand that in operation it just wouldn't, but it just doesn't read entirely clear to me.
okay, I'm happy to take that back and read through it again. When I read through it, I thought it was fairly clear that if it related specifically to the CEO, that there would be no involvement in any of this decision-making about how the investigation would be handled. But I'm happy to take that back and take another look and make sure that it's clear.
Further questions?
Chair, I did have a question around defining the purpose and all corporate facilities and workplaces, and there's a number of examples provided there. Where does interactions that take place through, let's say, social media fit into that, within the realm of business activities, or is that defined within this or not?
That's a fair question. I don't think it's specifically defined within this. We have spoken about it within the social media policy, and then there'll be some mention of that in the communications policy as well. We can certainly add a piece or a reference within the policy here that it needs to also encompass any interaction linked to social media communications policy needs to be considered for that as well, because all of those communications need to be subject to the code of conduct for sure.
Anything further? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much for that. Move on. Sorry. Oh, okay, it's for our benefit.
It's for your benefit.
Sorry, Ainsley, there are just doors shutting in our room, so. Okay. Forgive me for being awkward. Working remotely policy, we'll move on to that then. And Ms. Kenzie, I believe this is you as well. And I'm wondering if maybe we can bundle perhaps this one and the next one together, because they're kind of related.
They are very similar, so I'm happy to bundle the two together. These are both new policies that we're bringing forward. We spoke about it at the previous meeting, just in light of some of our new realities and the fact that we have had staff working at home earlier this year through COVID. We determined that it would be important to have a more formalized policy. So the first one is if there is a staff request to work from home, and the second one obviously is for business continuity plans. Business continuity is important for us because it may require staff working in other offices, our backup space at 170 10th Street, or in fact working from home. But they speak to the measure of protection for the corporation, ensuring that there's ongoing protection of privacy for any of the tenant information that they may be accessing from home, and then it provides a more formal process for this, so that if there's a request and an approval and it gets reviewed on an annual basis. For those of you with staff, this will closely mirror the City of London policies. We try to make best use of those since it's similar staffing group and certainly similar union. But these, yeah, I think are timely. We, will hopefully not necessarily have to make use of the continuity one, but want to be able to support tenants or staff that may need to be working from home for any reason. If there's anything in particular that anyone has any questions about, I'm happy to entertain those.
Questions, comments? Ms. Wilcox?
Through you, Chair, just a comment, I'm really happy to see both of these together. I think having a broad policy that seems beyond a pandemic is really great, and I think the proactiveness and having a working remotely policy, recognizing where we're at right now is really good. I appreciate the comprehensiveness of the policy, and they're really clear and really helpful around, even helpful tips around how to work from home and how to manage working remotely. So I think it's really good.
Pass it on to Kim. I won't take credit for the for the thoroughness of them, but they are very thorough.
Anything further? I just have one, if I can find it here. It's just on the criteria on page 36, C. So I really like that we've articulated criteria to help with judgment, and the plan that's proposed, or the employee preparing a plan that then they discuss with the manager is great, and I think that'll be really helpful. I'm just wondering, though, how we objectively measure these criteria for the employee. And I know some of it's subjective, but I'm wondering, like, is there performance plans that employees are engaging with their manager on a regular basis that could then support some of these criteria then? I'm just thinking of the discussion and conversation we have with the manager and the employee, and I don't want there to be a position where someone's saying, well, I don't trust you, and that's why I don't.
No.
It's sort of getting to that, and I can understand how, like, the mutual trust is really important for this context, but just wondering if there is anything in place to help with that determination.
Through you, Chair. I don't know that I would say that there is formally right now. We do go through, obviously, a performance review. It is not considered this type of, like, because this is a new policy.
Yeah.
So it will be something that we will have to incorporate into our performance review moving forward. And so those are, I mean, my expectation, if there are issues or concerns around trust, is that those conversations should be happening on a regular basis.
Yeah,
and they should be working on the relationship on a regular basis. That's not a conversation that should be happening just at the time that the request to work from home comes forward. Stranger things have probably happened. But so I'm happy to take that back and just give some consideration to how we sort of incorporate a bit more of that into the staff support conversations that all the managers should have with the team.
Anything further? All right. So that was for both of the working remotely policy and the working remotely business continuity policy. So I'll just ask one more time if there are anything for either of those items then. Making sure that's clear. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to scent-free workplace.
So again, this, sorry, through you, Chair. Be more formal. This is not a new policy, but this is an update to an existing policy. It was originally passed by our board back in 2014, and it hasn't been reviewed since that time. So some of the changes that you will see are just slight housekeeping. There are some updates to legislation as well that have been included that hadn't been identified previously. The AOTA, I do not believe, has been identified in our previous policy. And then we've got also the inclusion of the frequently asked questions. And this, I will give you just a little bit of background. This it hadn't been a policy that we had anticipated necessarily bringing forward, but it was through the advent of COVID and all of the additional cleaning products that were being used in the office. And so we had a staff member identify that they were having a reaction to some of those products. And we have been lax here. We haven't had signage around the office to remind people that this should be a scent-free environment. And so we're trying to just get this policy before all of you. We'll get this approved, and then we will start putting up signage and making sure that all of the staff are able to come to work in a safe environment. That, yeah, so it was just time to revisit the policy, for sure.
Any comments, questions? Pretty straightforward. Oh. Mr. Ron?
Chair, to the staff, just, pages, I think it's page 1, the agenda. And I just highlighted, it says, efforts will be made to maintain scent-free office space, interview rooms, reception area, and CRW site offices. I just wasn't sure what CRW.
Community relations worker.
Okay.
So those are the offices we have out.
Okay.
We're usually better. We've gotten better with our not using abbreviations, but that was.
I figured it was an office on one of the,
Yeah, it is, yeah.
our locations, but I wasn't sure what that meant. So, thank you.
Any further? Seeing none, okay. We'll move on then to the communications policy. I can't say it, but it's you again.
It is. I'm starting to feel like a listen now. Thank you through you, Chair. This is the next phase of our overall communication strategy. So Jordan Wayman, the communications specialist, has drafted this document. This is aligned with the social media policy that you reviewed last month. There will be asset management communication strategy coming forward, crisis communication, along with the regeneration communication strategy. So they all form part of the overall strategy that Jordan is developing. So this is really intended to help overall communication with tenants, with members of the public, with media. So it governs those relationships, and it's to ensure tenants are knowing that they're being heard, so that there will be responses if we have, like we think about the care email that we have. So if tenants are actually connecting with us in that way, we will acknowledge and we will respond so that they know that their voice is being heard. So this is really the framework for improving our communication. And then we took the time to address some of the privacy concerns as well. In the past, I think through no ill intent, staff have just forwarded long chains, just sent seeing emails out potentially to contractors that contain potentially private information related to a tenant or something internal here that we shouldn't be sharing. So this gives a little bit of a clearer understanding for all of the staff about how we will sort of control the communications, and the communication specialist, Jordan currently, will work closely with each department and have oversight over those communications as well.
Comments, questions? Ms. Wilcox?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one question, section regarding digital platforms. So the second paragraph references the two inboxes that are available for tenants. So are there service standards that apply to those? And I apologize if that's part of the KPIs that we look at, and I just can't quite recall. And I'm not sure it needs to be defined in here, but that they adhere, responses are provided within X number of days as well. Whether that's part of, if I send something into that regular response, that acknowledge it's received, and then if you expect to receive a response in X period of time.
So through the chair, those would be service standards, and so those wouldn't necessarily be the metrics that you would see on a regular basis. They would come to senior leadership, and then things get rolled up on an annual basis. But there are service standards that are being set for any, we determine like length of time people are on the call, to actually speak to somebody, the number of emails coming in and the response time, all of that gets measured.
I wondered if maybe, I don't think service standards is pretty operational, so I don't necessarily think it needs to be in the policy, but perhaps for reference.
Reference.
Yeah, so established service standards of that nature.
Chair, Mr. Mackenzie, this is just a few, things about, I'm wondering about section 17, they're actually needed, or they're meant to be something else? Actually, 19 too. 19 is related documents, and that seems to me to be, it's also up on the top of the policy too, with those boxes, I think, so it's fairly, it could be redundant, I was just wondering if it is. 17 and 18 look like unfinished thoughts, but I'm not sure. And there's one in section 6 too that was an unfinished sentence, but I think you just need to strike it out.
Certainly 19 is redundant. It's reflected at the beginning of the document, so those changes will happen before the formal policy comes forward for recommendation. And looking at the other ones, the keywords, I haven't thought that before, so thank you. I will take that back, and I'll have a conversation with Jordan and I can have a review of that, because I've read this thing so many times.
Yeah.
I think I've stopped seeing anything different now, but I've made a note, so we'll take that back and make sure that there's some clear thoughts that if we will miss something there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay, seeing none, well, that's great, guys. That brings us to the end of the policies contained for discussion tonight. So we have 100-page agenda here, and so that's almost 100 pages worth of policies that we reviewed and discussed. So I want to thank everyone for, that's a heck of a lot of work that goes into the ideation, the formulation, the drafting, and all of that to even get to this point. So we greatly appreciate all of that, so thanks for the hard work. The only question I have then, sort of to wrap things up, is when these come forward, they'll be approved. I'm just wondering then what the rollout is then for our staff for training as these sort of things come forward. That'd be great to know.
So through your chair, certainly I had a conversation with our unit chair today, specifically about the tenant code of conduct one and what that would look like. They're aware that we were bringing all of these policies forward tonight, and I said, depending on what changes, we would share it with the unit first, probably in the coming couple of weeks, just so that they have time to review it in advance of final approval. Traditionally, any policies like that, we would roll out at a staff day. So we would do a half day or a full day where the office is closed and all staff would come together. We would do some team building exercises. We would go through any kind of policy adjustment. So I don't know yet, to be honest with you, how we're going to do this, because we are such a large staffing group now. We cannot all come together at the same time. So we have started to turn our minds to what this is going to look like if it's just bringing in smaller groups and doing it on a rotating basis. Maybe it's going to be mornings and afternoons for several days, just because it's also a question of we're bringing people in here that even if we have 20, we've got to be able to keep people certain distance apart. But for those types of policies, for the code of conduct, there is a sign-off that's required to make sure that staff have reviewed it and that stays on their personnel file as well. For the standard policy, that is likely just something we would distribute via email. That's not something that we would bring everybody back together for. So each policy is looked at differently, but we have started to turn our minds to how we're going to do it, because we don't have the opportunity to do it in a normal way.
That's great. Okay, so unless there's anything else that I'm missing? Not? Okay, thanks very much, everyone. We are adjourned. Actually, sorry, can I have a motion, I guess, to adjourn? Sure, Ms. Wilcox, seconded by Mr. Milson. All those in favor? Opposed. All right, thank you very much, and have a great long weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, Ainsley.
Next, month, it's all Shelley.
Oh, is that right?